idea that you want to think about when you're improvising over a 145 South African style song, otherwise known as Marabi style. Get acquainted with patterns as well as using the pentatonic scale. What I mean by patterns is primarily on the chord 1, we want to use this pattern of 1, 2, 3, 5, but we want to invert that and we will put 5 at the bottom. Just even using that on its own is already giving me kind of like a classic essay style in a way. And when I use it, I can use it not only starting on the third, right? I could also add auxiliary notes, which are neighboring notes either from the top or the bottom of whatever note you're targeting. So I did. And close some of the notes. Pentatonics. I had made a video quite a while ago about Ubhuti Moses Mulelekwa and how he used pentatonics. Firstly, the major pentatonic looks like this. Right, it's 5 notes. 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and then of course back to 1. But what Mulelekwa does is that he uses these kind of sets of 2. And these are all coming from the pentatonic. If I use the pentatonic idea of Mulelekwa as well as the patterns, these two concepts kind of give me a really African sounding style, you know. That you want to use is the blues. For me, when I think of American blues, you know, I don't really think it much different than our traditional 145 style. It's just that the cycle is quicker. So of course the American blues would be just the turnaround, but basically all chords are dominant. That's my point. And this is what you can employ when you use a 145. You can use dominant chords. So if instead of just making it a plain F triad, I can make it F7. The C you can still keep suspended. And the nice thing about this is that it kind of, you introduce this major and minor third, which is a blues effect. Because of we have flat 7, this line, which I'm sure you've heard on a lot of SA records, but also South African musicians that you probably hear when you go to shows. This is just a play on the fact that we are using F7, so we are targeting the flat 7 for chord 4 dominant. Right, so when we make them dominant chords, it gives us that major and minor sound, which hints at a blues kind of sound, which is cool. Now the last thing that I wanted to talk about, I had made a video about how to improvise over South African 145, similar to what I'm doing now. And in there I'd also mentioned about playing over the changes, and there was someone who commented, I'll put the comment somewhere over here, that this idea of playing over the changes, he sees it as kind of a floating, which the way that you had put it is so applicable, because you actually want to float over the changes. And what I mean by that is, so technically we could play an F kind of a scale, or what I like to do, I like to play the relative minor. Every major has a relative minor, and the relative minor of F major is D minor. So I like to use D minor shapes, lines, pentatonic, everything, bebop lines and whatnot. I don't want to go off too much on a tangent. You want to use bebop lines, right? Just as a side note quickly before I go to that last step. So this video is not really about bebop, although that is something that overall, when you're looking at South African jazz, a lot of musicians employ things from bebop. And depending on where you want to take your solo, if you want to add interest in a specific kind of style, bebop is really useful. The more things you have, the better you get at soloing. And most of the time, these things really are not used in isolation. They are used in conjunction with each other. So that's just a side note that I wanted to put out there, is this idea that I was talking about, playing over the changes. And you can pick a tonal center. So let's say maybe you pick a blues scale. You can play the blues scale over the whole progression. Let's say you pick F pentatonic, any tonal center scale or idea or concept. I'm going to do D minor just because D minor is relative to F major. And I like to use this idea a lot, and it works really well. So, for example, if I take the F major patterns, I do the same for D minor, but I use it over F major. I really like that sound. So I could use the pentatonic for D minor. These are all D minor lines. When I land on the D minor, it's not as strong of a pull as on F major, of course, but again, you want to add as many things as you want to do. D minor pentatonic. Right? The resolution is not as strong, but it works. then it takes me to D minor blues. Right? Not as strong of a pull, but again, it works. And as I had mentioned earlier in the video, these things are mostly not used in isolation. So you want to, use them together and see how well you can come up with a solo. And one thing I always stress when I teach people, and when in my own practice session, this is something that I have learned a lot, is that you really don't need a lot of notes to make a solo sound good. Think about the song, think about the style and what it needs. When your audience is listening to you, it's actually better, and it makes more sense when you give them, short phrases and pauses in between to kind of take in what you're playing, what you're saying. So I'm gonna play a solo, and I'm gonna try to put on the screen what I'm doing of what I talked about in the video. But I'm not gonna think about that too much. I'm just gonna play just a solo over, a short solo over 145. You can just take note of how we use these things, together to form a relatively good solo.